Most men think the game begins when they decide to play. But the real game has already begun even before your first message, before your first glance, even before you understand you're interested. And that's where the danger lies. Because what you don't know might be exactly what's ruining you. And no, this isn't emotional conspiracy theory. This is applied psychology, masterfully played in the field where reason loses to instinct and logic is torn apart by emotion. Do you believe that women are emotional and men are rational? Forget it. That's the first illusion. Women are profoundly strategic in how they express emotion. While you react to a feeling, she's already using that feeling as a tool. You fall in love and surrender. She observes, calculates, tests. It's not that they're all bad, it's that they all understand on some level that male vulnerability is fertile ground for power. This isn't malice, it's nature. Robert Greene, in The Art of Seduction, leaves no doubt. Seduction isn't about sex, it's about power. And the most absolute power is that which is exercised without the other person realizing it. The seduced person feels free while being led. They believe they made the decision, when in reality they only followed a script someone wrote behind the scenes. And the most perverse part? Most men will never see through the script. They only feel the emptiness when the stage is dismantled and the leading actress disappears with the applause that was rightfully hers. Modern female seduction doesn't need sharp words, revealing necklines, or promises of pleasure. It disguises itself as empathy, fluid conversation, and genuine interest, and the moment you feel most understood, most validated, most seen, that's exactly when you're most vulnerable. Because the man who lowers his guard in exchange for comfort also surrenders his weapons without realizing it. And at that moment, she doesn't need to scream. She just needs to smile, agree, and disappear. This is the field where the darkest psychological tricks operate. But be careful. This isn't about demonizing women. Far from it. It's about understanding that, in any power dynamic, the one who ignores the mechanisms of the game is always the most vulnerable. Social ignorance has a price, and it's paid with anxiety, frustration, and loss of control. The man who is unaware of the emotional weapons used against him is always one step behind, always at a disadvantage, always emotionally indebted. And the cruelest part? She doesn't always do it consciously. Many of these patterns are rooted in the female psyche for generations, inherited, tested, and refined as a form of self-protection. The woman who uses silence as a form of emotional punishment often doesn't even realize she's manipulating. She just feels she's no longer being valued. The one who becomes vulnerable in a calculated way doesn't think she's being cruel. She just wants attention. And the one who mirrors your ideal behavior knows it charms you, but believes she's just connecting. But none of these actions are neutral. All generate a profound impact, and all are subtle forms of control. If you want to survive, and more than that, thrive, in this environment of camouflaged psychological warfare, you need to do exactly what most men never dare. See reality naked, raw, without romantic filters. That's where true power begins. Not the power that oppresses or imposes itself, but the power that recognizes patterns, deciphers intentions, and reacts with strategic presence. The man who understands the game becomes untouchable, not because he shuts himself off, but because he reads the script while everyone else is still rehearsing lines. In the next few minutes, you'll learn 3 of the most powerful and dangerous psychological tricks women use against men every day. Techniques that operate at the unconscious level, but produce devastating effects. They are patterns so common that you've probably experienced them, and perhaps you're experiencing one of them right now. The problem isn't feeling. The problem is feeling without understanding, because emotion without awareness is fertile ground for manipulation. Trick 1. Deceptive vulnerability. She seemed hurt. Not in that explosive, dramatic way that screams for attention. It was more subtle, more captivating, like a sad song that holds you through empathy. You wanted to understand what hurt her. You wanted to heal. You wanted to be the first man who would treat her with respect, after so many others who, according to her, didn't know how to handle a woman like her. And there you fell. Not out of neediness, but out of instinct. The instinct to protect. The biggest trick of deceptive vulnerability is simple: to appear broken enough that you don't see her as a threat, but whole enough to still awaken desire. It's a fine line between the victim and the tragic goddess. And when she occupies this role, she disarms your critical mind, suspends your rationality, and activates your sense of mission. She doesn't just want your desire, she wants your devotion, and she will get it. Don't be fooled. This isn't the woman who screams for help. She whispers. She slips between phrases like, "My ex made me doubt myself," or "I'm hard to love." She lays out a dose of pain to anticipate your doubt. And when you start thinking about walking away, you feel guilty. Because after all, how can you turn your back on someone who has already suffered so much? This pattern operates in the depths of the male psyche. The figure of the wounded woman activates ancestral archetypes, the knight and the damsel in distress, the idea of redemption through affection. The false promise that if you are good enough, if you love enough, she will finally feel safe. But what really happens is something else. You become emotionally hostage to a narrative that isn't yours. You commit to a pain that doesn't belong to you. And that, sooner or later, will destroy you. This tactic is much more common than it seems, and it doesn't require conscious coldness. Many women use it without realizing it. They have learned throughout their lives that demonstrating vulnerability attracts more empathy than showing strength. The role of the damsel in distress who has suffered too much generates more emotional engagement than that of the autonomous and emotionally stable woman. And so, unknowingly, they transform pain into a currency of power. But there are those who play the game intentionally. The emotional strategists, those who know exactly when to recount their trauma, when to shed a tear, when to share that heavy story from childhood or about an abusive ex-boyfriend. And you, out of empathy, tenderness, or simply humanity, get closer. You lower your guard. You lower your shield. And when you realize it, you're in love not with her, but with what you believe you can do for her. With the man you believe you can become by her side. This is the cruelest trap of manipulative vulnerability. It transforms you into the protagonist of a story where your role is to save, even if it costs you peace, energy, and dignity. You're not in a relationship, you're on a mission. And worse, it never ends. Because the more you give, the wider the hole gets. And the promise of redemption becomes increasingly distant. Something is always missing. There's always another trauma. There's always another blockage. And the prize, which was unconditional love, becomes conditional on your emotional performance as a caregiver, as a redeemer, as a safe haven. Psychology explains this well. Dr. Stephen Cartman, in his theory of the drama triangle, describes the recurring roles in manipulative relationships: victim, savior, and persecutor. The vulnerable woman masterfully plays the role of victim, and you, believing you are rescuing her, assume the role of savior, until the day your attempt to set boundaries is interpreted as abandonment, and she puts you in the role of persecutor. You, who were once the hero, become the villain, and the cycle begins again with another man. And the most tragic part? The more intelligent and empathetic you are, the easier it is to fall into this trap. Because you will try to understand, you will analyze, you will justify, you will be rational with the irrational. And while you think, she feels. And while you ponder, she acts. Because she has already understood that your sense of logic is your own emotional prison. And she will use that against you, masterfully. I'll tell you the story of Kaio, a successful corporate mentor, emotionally mature, respected in the business world, and extremely rational. He met Clara at a lecture. She seemed introspective, elegant, with a look that carried sadness and intelligence. In less than 2 weeks, she told him that she came from an abusive relationship, that she had severe anxiety and fear of abandonment. Kaio, like any man with empathy and a sense of responsibility, approached cautiously, offering emotional security. In 3 months, he was emotionally exhausted, always feeling responsible for her mood swings, walking on eggshells so as not to trigger her, and without realizing that he had been transformed into the new tormentor. Kaio's mistake wasn't loving. It was believing he could heal what he didn't cause. It was confusing empathy with emotional submission. And this is where the key to counterattack lies. Understanding that vulnerability isn't a crime, but that it needs to be accompanied by emotional responsibility. The woman who exposes her traumas without seeking growth turns you into a therapist. The one who demands you walk on tiptoe in the name of her past is playing dirty. because she transfers the weight of her pain to you and exempts herself from the real work of healing. But how to identify when vulnerability is real and when it's strategic? First sign: consistency. The truly vulnerable woman is emotionally humble. She doesn't display her pain like a medal, nor does she use it as justification for manipulation. She acknowledges her limitations, but demonstrates effort to evolve. The manipulative woman, on the other hand, settles into the role of victim. She uses her traumas as a shield to avoid being questioned and as a sword to control. Second, emotional reciprocity. True vulnerability creates mutual connection. She cares about how you feel, your well-being, your insecurities. False vulnerability is one-sided. You become the stage where she enacts her dramas. Third, evolution. The woman who only repeats the same patterns, the same speeches, the same blockages is not vulnerable. She is stagnant. And whoever is emotionally stagnant inevitably drags down whoever they connect with. This is where you need to establish a new posture. One of strategic empathy, of listening attentively but maintaining discernment, of welcoming but not absorbing, of caring without sinking. The man who understands this does not close himself off to love, he opens himself to healthy love. Because he understands that love is not a mission, it is an encounter. It is not a fix, it is an exchange. Carl Jung said, "Everything that irritates us in others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." But I add, everything that blindly seduces us can too. If you feel an obsessive need to save someone, ask yourself, what does that say about the emotional void inside you? Because sometimes the woman you want to save is a reflection of your own insecurity disguised as altruism. And that's why the trick of deceptive vulnerability is so dangerous. Because it's not vulnerability that holds you captive. It's your need to be needed. It's the ego masked as empathy. It's the desire to be the only one capable of fixing what everyone else has failed to do. But this narrative is a trap, because the only guaranteed result is frustration. So when you encounter a woman who displays her wounds too early, who makes you feel responsible for healing her before even knowing you deeply, take a deep breath. Observe, question, and understand. The pain may be real, but how she uses it, that reveals the game. The most dangerous woman isn't the one who confronts you forcefully. It's the one who disarms you with weakness, because while you try to protect her from the world, she's training you to be emotionally obedient. And from the moment you believe that love depends on your ability to endure, you've already lost. And if you think that's the end of the manipulation, wait until you understand the next trick. Because if deceptive vulnerability traps you through guilt, what comes next imprisons you through desire. Trick 2. The emotional mirror. She likes the same bands as you. She laughed at your inside jokes. She made an obscure reference that only someone with the same background could make. And then you thought, impossible. I finally found someone who understands me. But what you didn't realize is that each of these common points, each emotional synchronicity, each personality coincidence, wasn't a discovery. It was a construction. And this construction had a single purpose: to gain your trust faster than your logic could react. This is the most elegant, sophisticated, and hardest trick to detect: emotional mirroring. And if you think this is something subtle and harmless, prepare yourself. Because when done by someone with real social skills, mirroring can turn even an intelligent man into an emotional slave. And he never understands how it happened. The human brain, however advanced, is still a social organ. We evolved with the tendency to connect with those who are similar to us. This bias, called the similarity bias, is one of the best documented principles in social psychology. When we see someone who shares our tastes, our values, our worldviews, the brain releases dopamine. This dopamine rewards us for finding someone from our group. This instantly increases our confidence, empathy, and vulnerability. But what happens when the other person understands this process and uses it against you? She observes you. She mentally notes your expressions, your mannerisms, your speech patterns. She pays attention to how you describe your ex-girlfriends and molds her behavior to be the exact opposite of the flaws you criticized. If you say you like simple and discreet women, she hides her more provocative side. If you say you're tired of needy women, she shows herself to be self-sufficient, at least for now. The name for this? Emotional engineering. The woman who masters mirroring isn't showing you who she is, she's showing you who you want her to be. And this is incredibly effective, because men, contrary to what they like to believe, don't fall in love with the real woman. They fall in love with a projection. And when someone presents themselves exactly within that projection, you surrender. Not out of love, but out of recognition. You think you found someone who truly sees you, but what she's seeing isn't you. It's the script you revealed in the first conversations, and which she's following perfectly. This is the most dangerous trick because it activates a deep fantasy, that there's someone who was made for you. The famous soulmate. The woman who will understand you without you needing to explain. Who will predict your thoughts, complete your sentences, know what you feel. It's beautiful, but it's also the most efficient trap ever created against the male mind. Because nothing weakens a man more than the feeling of finally being understood. And here comes the contradiction that few see. Mirroring isn't connection. It's a persuasion technique. It's what salespeople practice to close deals. It's what manipulators use to build instant rapport. And when you give in to that, you're allowing your emotional map to be used as a GPS to control you. The worst part? It's almost impossible to identify at first, because she doesn't lie, she just omits. She doesn't say she loves a certain movie, but loves stories with unexpected endings, like the one you mentioned. She doesn't say she's experiencing the same situation, but shares a story similar to yours in the same emotional tone. This creates an invisible bond, a psychological tie that strengthens over time. And when you realize it, you're no longer comparing behaviors. You're just feeling. And everything we feel intensely, we justify with logic afterward. This trick is especially powerful on men who consider themselves outside the norm. More intelligent, introspective men who don't easily connect with just anyone. These are the perfect targets for emotional mirroring. Because when they feel that finally someone understands me, that feeling is so rare, so valuable, that they ignore all warning signs. And how does she gather this information? With questions. With active listening. With small social tests. The strategic woman observes how you react to certain comments. If you speak ill of an ex who is jealous, she reinforces the idea that she values freedom in a relationship. If you say you're reserved, she becomes more receptive and respectful. But as soon as you start to open up, the dynamic changes, and she reveals her true face. Sometimes subtly, sometimes with full force. And you, already emotionally involved, try to adapt your own identity to her new version. The real version. Want concrete proof of this? Take any man who broke up with a manipulative woman. Ask him what attracted him to her in the beginning. He'll say, she seemed perfect. Everything fit. It was as if we were the same person. Exactly. She seemed like you because she was being you. This trick has already been studied by neuroscience. The so-called chameleon effect shows that when a person subtly imitates our expressions, gestures, and verbal patterns, the tendency is for us to like them more. It's an unconscious bias. But there's a difference between natural synchronicity and deliberate manipulation. And the woman who masters this game knows exactly where she's stepping. Let's talk about a real case. Andre, a well-adjusted, emotionally stable entrepreneur in the creative sector, met a woman at a networking event. She seemed to understand everything he said. She shared his cultural references. She could cite authors he admired. She laughed at the right times, agreed with him when he disagreed. In less than a month, he was convinced it was the best start to an emotional connection he had ever experienced. But little by little, she began to demand availability. Small emotional crises arose. She demanded more time, more attention, more validation. When he tried to set boundaries, she turned the tables. She said he had deceived her, that he wasn't who he seemed to be. And she made him doubt his own perception. What seemed like a connection turned into emotional blackmail. Andre realized, too late, that she had only assumed his form, to then mold him into her own. This type of manipulation works because the average man has a structural flaw. He confuses validation with affinity. When a woman validates your worldview, he assumes she shares that worldview. But validating isn't sharing. Validating is mirroring. It's giving back what you want to hear in the tone you want to feel. And this, when done by someone with a real intention to control, becomes an invisible weapon. But how to protect yourself from this without becoming paranoid? First, be wary of premature synchronicity. When everything fits together too quickly, too soon, too intensely, there's a good chance it's not real. True connection takes time. It demands conflict, divergence, contrast. If a woman seems too perfect from the start, don't feel lucky, feel warned. Second, observe how she reacts to different opinions. A woman who is mirroring you doesn't tolerate a break in expectations. If you say something that deviates from her script, she recalibrates. She changes her tone. Retreating or taking offense at a simple disagreement is a sign that the mirroring game has been broken, and now you're seeing the actress, not the role. Third test. Say something you don't completely believe in. An ambiguous stance. A controversial opinion. See how she reacts. The authentic woman will question you, debate, express a point of view. The one who is mirroring will simply agree. Because her goal is not to express herself, it's to merge with you until you confuse identity with affinity. Emotional mirroring is effective because it uses a man's own desire for deep connection as bait. And here's the most brutal part. The more emotionally evolved you are, the more susceptible you become. Because you're not looking for bodies, you're looking for souls. And whoever seeks souls opens doors that shouldn't always be opened. It's not about shutting yourself off. It's about perceiving. Understanding that people with bad intentions don't enter your life with a dark aura and a malevolent gaze. They enter smiling, listening to you, understanding you, imitating you. And the moment you start saying, she's different from all the others, perhaps it's precisely because she studied all the others, and now she's the exception you want to find. The real defense against this trick isn't cynicism. It's aggressive authenticity. Showing from the beginning who you are, with complexity, with paradoxes, with contradictions. Because the harder it is to mirror you, the easier it will be to distinguish who is trying to imitate you from who is trying to understand you. And the moment you are truly understood by someone who not only resembles you, but who resists, confronts, and yet remains, then, yes, you will have found something real. Trick 3. The tactical withdrawal. She was there every day. She responded quickly, laughed at your jokes, called you by intimate nicknames, said she missed you when you were late replying. The warmth was constant, the affection predictable, the presence comfortable. And then, she disappeared. Without a clear reason, without conflict, without a sign. The messages dwindled, the replies became cold, the emojis vanished. What was once a vibrant energy turned into a vacuum. And you, even trying to maintain composure, felt the ice run down your spine. Your brain didn't understand, but your body reacted. She didn't abandon you, she took away your addiction. And now you needed her more than ever. This is the cruelest and most effective psychological trick, the tactical withdrawal. Contrary to what many think, silence is not absence. It's a phantom presence. And when a woman who gave you everything suddenly withdraws, your nervous system goes into emotional panic. Because instinctively, humans associate constant affection with security. And when that consistency is taken away, fear sets in. You're no longer seeking affection, you're seeking relief from anxiety. And that's the perfect breeding ground for completely losing control over your actions. Science has clearly shown this. B.F. Skinner, a behavioral psychologist, conducted experiments with pigeons, feeding them intermittent reinforcement, that is, delivering rewards randomly. The result? The pigeons became obsessive, pressing the lever endlessly, even without knowing when or if they would be rewarded. This behavior was called the intermittent reinforcement effect. Now replace the food with female attention, and you'll see the same effect in men who beg for crumbs of affection after they've become addicted to a pattern of constant presence. The trick of withdrawal works like this. First, it warms you up. It creates an emotional routine. It enters your life frequently, energetically, and consistently. It makes you a priority, sometimes even pressuring you for reciprocity. You get used to it, you adapt. Your defenses start to drop, you start responding faster, you start thinking about her all day. You don't realize it, but your brain has already associated her presence with reward. And it's at that moment, at the peak of your surrender, that she disappears. But she doesn't disappear completely, and here lies the genius of the manipulation. She doesn't vanish to the point of seeming like the end. She withdraws to the point of seeming like doubt. She creates a nebulous space where you don't know if you did something wrong, if she's busy, if she's testing you, or if she's already found someone better. And this uncertainty is key, because human beings tolerate pain but go crazy in doubt. The most curious thing is that most men interpret this withdrawal as a sign of disinterest, but it's precisely the opposite. It's a test of emotional dominance. The woman who uses this trick wants to see if you run, if you despair, if you trade her silence for your own dignity. And many do exactly that. They start sending needy, long messages, asking for explanations, justifying mistakes they didn't even make. And the more they do this, the more value they lose. Not because they care, but because they react. Tactical withdrawal is the favorite tool of women who understand the value of scarcity. In economics, the rarer a resource, the more valuable it becomes. In the emotional realm, the same applies. When she was present, you had her. When she disappears, you desire her. And in this cycle of temporary loss, the mind becomes addicted. Because what disappears without explanation creates ghosts. And ghosts are harder to exorcise than real presences. A clear example of this was the case of Raphael, an independent musician who fell in love with a vibrant, attentive, affectionate woman. For 2 months, she was everything he wanted. She listened to his compositions, showed up at rehearsals, said she felt they were uniquely connected. But the moment he declared his feelings intensely, she cooled off. She didn't break up. She just became busier, less accessible, less involved. Raphael, insecure, started sending long messages, flowers, missed calls. Within a week, he was emotionally devastated. The power that was once balanced shifted, and she, sensing this reversal, began to treat him with subtle disdain. Because deep down, she had already won the game. The question that destroys many men is, what did I do wrong? But that's the wrong question. Because the trick doesn't depend on what you did. It depends on how attached you became. The more committed you are, the stronger the impact of the withdrawal will be. And that's why this pattern works so well with men who aren't playing games. Sincere, intense men, emotionally available. They aren't prepared to deal with cold strategies because they are being authentic. And authenticity, without strategy, is raw vulnerability. But how do you distinguish a manipulative withdrawal from a natural distancing? First, context. If she distanced herself after you gave yourself, declared your feelings, or demonstrated great interest, it's probably strategic. Second, general behavior. People who disappear without explanation but continue posting actively, laughing with friends, liking photos, are signaling something. It's not absence, it's selective presence. Third, return. The woman who uses withdrawal as a technique usually returns casually, as if nothing happened. She expects you to stay there, available, hungry for even the slightest attention. If you're in that position, you've already lost the game. The defense against this trick isn't counterattack, it's conscious withdrawal. The man who understands this dynamic doesn't react with despair. He recognizes the pattern, breathes, and leaves the field. He doesn't send long texts, he doesn't ask what happened, he doesn't try to reverse the situation. Because he knows that if she disappeared as a test, the only valid response is indifference. And here comes a brutal concept: selective scarcity. If you want to turn the tables, you need to understand the value of your absence. Your silence, when applied with strategic coldness, is worth more than 1,000 words. The woman who senses that you don't react like others begins to question her own worth. She begins to move to reclaim what she believes she is losing. Because the female ego, like the male, hates indifference more than rejection. Rejection is pain, indifference is insignificance. And nobody tolerates being insignificant. But be warned, this doesn't mean that every woman who withdraws is manipulating. Often, the withdrawal is real: disinterest, other focuses, tiredness. But the manipulative woman never disappears cleanly. She leaves hooks, she leaves traces. She makes you believe there's still a chance, and that almost is what keeps you hooked. The name for that? Emotional ambiguity. And it's more addictive than any certainty. That's why when a woman uses a tactical withdrawal, you can't react like a wounded man. You need to react like a strategist. You need to read the pattern, remember previous cycles, connect the dots. Because if you fall into the trap of trying to understand what happened, you're already emotionally surrendered. The secret here is simple but difficult to apply. Value her presence more than her absence. The man who recognizes his own worth never despairs over someone who withdraws without explanation, because he understands that emotional reciprocity is a prerequisite, not a prize. And if she uses disappearance as a test, he rejects the game and changes sides. That's why I created the Forbidden Manual. Content that will give you the psychological tools they already use against you, so you can take control of the game. This isn't just another ebook with ready-made phrases or recycled tactics. This is a strategic training ground on how to activate female desire in 60 seconds, even if you don't have money, exceptional looks, or social status. Click the link below and become invincible.